10-year-old Sophia Blackwood's voice, raw with terror, echoed through the grand foyer as she stood frozen on the curved staircase. Her small hands gripped the iron railing so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Below her, a man in a gray maintenance uniform turned slowly, his weathered face creasing with confusion and concern. Victoria Blackwood materialized at the top of the stairs, her silk robe billowing behind her as she rushed to her daughter. Sophia's entire body trembled, her dark eyes wide with a fear so primal it seemed to drain the color from her olive skin. "Mommy, make him go away," Sophia whispered, pressing herself against the wall. "He's the shadow man. He's the one who comes when I close my eyes." The janitor, Marcus Sullivan according to his name tag, stood motionless in the entrance hall, a mop bucket at his feet and genuine bewilderment written across his face. He was perhaps 50, with graying hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years and harder choices. Everything about him seemed ordinary, unremarkable. Everything except the way Sophia looked at him, like he'd crawled straight out of her worst dreams. Victoria's heart hammered as she gathered her daughter into her arms. For 3 years since the accident that killed her husband David, Sophia had been plagued by nightmares so vivid and terrifying that sleep had become the enemy. Night after night, Sophia would wake screaming about a faceless shadow man who chased her through endless dark hallways. 18 different specialists, 15 medications, countless therapy sessions. Nothing had worked. And now her daughter was claiming that this stranger, this ordinary maintenance worker, was the monster from her dreams. "Mrs. Blackwood," Marcus's voice was gentle, careful. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm just here to clean the windows. The service sent me because your regular guy called in sick." Victoria studied his face, searching for any trace of malice or recognition. She found none, just a tired-looking man holding a squeegee, as confused as she was, terrified. But Sophia's reaction was undeniable. Her daughter, who barely spoke above a whisper most days, had just screamed with more emotion than Victoria had heard from her in months. "Please," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "I think you should leave." Marcus nodded immediately, already reaching for his supplies. "Of course, I'm sorry this upset your daughter. I'll let the company know to send someone else." He moved toward the door, but Sophia's voice stopped him cold. "Wait." The word came out strangled, desperate. In my dreams, you always try to save me. But the shadows are too strong. They always pull me away before you can reach me." The mop bucket slipped from Marcus's hands, hitting the marble floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the silence. His face had gone completely pale. Victoria felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than a simple case of mistaken identity. Marcus turned back toward them, his movement slow and deliberate, like a man approaching a dangerous animal. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Victoria's skin prickle with warning. "What's your daughter's name?" "Sophia," Victoria whispered. Marcus closed his eyes, and for a moment, he looked like a man receiving a death sentence. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly, "I think we need to talk. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." Victoria Blackwood had built her life on control. At 34, she commanded a tech empire worth $3 billion. Her company, Blackwood Innovations, had revolutionized data security for half the Fortune 500. Magazines called her a visionary, but none of them mentioned the pills she took to sleep or the way she checked the locks on Sophia's bedroom door 3 times every night. The Blackwood estate sprawled across 12 acres in the hills above San Francisco, a monument to success that felt more like a fortress these days. 47 rooms, most of them unused. A staff of 12 who moved through the halls like ghosts, careful not to disturb the careful quiet that had settled over the house since David's death. 3 years ago, laughter had filled these rooms. David's voice calling out from his workshop, Sophia's giggles echoing from the garden, the warm chaos of a family that believed in tomorrow. Then came the hiking accident. A loose rock, a long fall, and everything that mattered had shattered against the canyon floor. David died instantly. Sophia somehow had survived with barely a scratch. But something inside her had broken that day, something that no doctor had been able to identify or repair. The nightmares started within a week of the funeral. At first, Victoria had dismissed them as normal grief response. Of course, a 7-year-old would have bad dreams after losing her father so traumatically. But these weren't ordinary nightmares. They came with a consistency and detail that chilled Victoria to the bone. Always the same story. Sophia running through dark corridors pursued by writhing shadows that whispered her name. And always, just as the darkness was about to consume her, a man would appear. Not her father, Sophia was always clear about that. Someone else. Someone whose face she could never quite see, but whose voice she remembered with startling clarity. "He tries to help me," Sophia would say. During the early morning therapy sessions, her small voice flat with exhaustion. "He calls my name, he reaches for me, but the shadows are stronger. They always win." Dr. Patricia Henley, the most expensive child psychologist in Northern California, had theories: trauma-induced anxiety, disorder, symbolic representation of loss. The mysterious helper figure was probably Sophia's subconscious, creating a father substitute, her mind's attempt to process abandonment. All very logical, all very scientific, all completely useless when it came to helping Sophia sleep through the night. Victoria had tried everything. Medication that left Sophia groggy and zombie-like during the day. Therapy animals that Sophia barely acknowledged. Even a spiritual healer David's mother had insisted on. Despite Victoria's skepticism, nothing worked. If anything, the dreams were getting worse. Last month, Sophia had started sleepwalking. Victoria would find her daughter standing at the windows, staring out into the darkness, whispering words that sounded almost like conversations. When asked what she was doing, Sophia would blink awake and say, "Looking for him. He's coming soon." Victoria had installed motion sensors and locks after that, anything to keep her daughter safe from the dangers her subconscious was creating. But nothing could protect Sophia from the enemy that lived inside her own mind. Until this morning, until a random window cleaner had walked into their lives and somehow become the face of Sophia's deepest fears. Victoria stood in the kitchen now, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, watching through the window as Marcus Sullivan loaded his supplies back into a dented white van. He moved like a man carrying invisible weight, his shoulders bent with something heavier than equipment. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. "Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. Johnson needs your signature on the merger docs. 3 interviews scheduled for this afternoon." The normal world, demanding her attention, the empire that required her focus. But Victoria couldn't tear her eyes away from the man who had somehow stepped out of her daughter's nightmares and into their reality. Sophia appeared beside her, no longer trembling but still pale. She'd changed into jeans and a purple sweater, her dark hair pulled back in the ponytail that meant she was trying to be brave. "Mommy," she said quietly, "why did seeing him make the scared feeling go away?" Victoria looked down at her daughter. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "In my dreams, I'm always running, always afraid. But when I saw him just now..." Sophia paused, searching for words. "It wasn't scary anymore. It was like like finding something I lost. Outside, Marcus had finished loading his van but hadn't driven away. He stood beside the driver's door, staring back at the house with an expression Victoria couldn't read from this distance. "Can we ask him to come back?" Sophia asked. "I think he has something important to tell us." Victoria's executive instincts screamed warnings. Don't invite strangers into your home. Don't trust someone you know nothing about. Don't risk your daughter's safety on a feeling, no matter how strong. But her mother's heart recognized something else entirely. For the first time in 3 years, Sophia wasn't afraid. The child who jumped at shadows and checked under her bed twice every night had just asked a stranger to return. Victoria made a decision that would have terrified her rational mind if she'd given it time to think. She walked to the front door and opened it. Marcus looked up from beside his van, surprise flickering across his weathered features. "Mr. Sullivan," Victoria called across the circular driveway, "would you mind coming back inside? I think my daughter would like to talk to you." For a moment, Marcus didn't move. Then he slowly closed the van door and walked back toward the house, each step deliberate and careful, like a man approaching a miracle he was afraid to disturb. As he climbed the front steps, Victoria noticed details she'd missed before. The way his left hand bore old scars, pale lines that suggested surgery or serious injury, the slight limp that favored his right side, the military bearing beneath the humble uniform, shoulders that had once carried more than cleaning supplies. Most importantly, she noticed the way his eyes softened when he looked at Sophia. Not with the careful distance of a stranger trying to be appropriate, but with something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. "Thank you," he said simply as he stepped back into the foyer. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to stay." Sophia moved closer to her mother but didn't hide behind her this time. "In my dreams," she said, "you never give up. Even when the shadows get stronger, you keep trying to save me. Why?" Marcus knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Sophia's eye level. When he spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that made Victoria's throat tight. "In my dreams, little bird, you keep calling my name. And when someone calls for help, you don't give up. You never give up." The nickname hit Sophia like a physical blow. Her eyes went wide, her breath catching in her throat. "You know about the dreams," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his own eyes bright with emotion he was struggling to contain. "I know about the dreams, Sophia. I've been having them too." Victoria felt the ground shift beneath her feet for the second time that morning. Whatever was happening here, it was beyond anything she could rationalize or control, and for the first time since David's death, she found herself hoping that some things were bigger than logic. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 11 times, marking the moment when Sophia Blackwood's carefully ordered world began to crack open, letting in possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. Marcus looked up at her, his face grave with the weight of secrets about to be shared. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly, "your daughter isn't the only one who's been having these dreams, and I think it's time I told you why." Victoria led Marcus and Sophia into the sunroom, a space filled with afternoon light and the kind of comfortable furniture that actually invited sitting. She needed somewhere that felt less formal than her office, less exposed than the grand living room, somewhere she could hear truths that might shatter everything she thought she knew. Marcus sat carefully in the chair, across from the sofa where Victoria and Sophia settled. His hands rested on his knees, steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. "Before I explain," he said quietly, "I need you to know that everything I'm going to tell you can be verified. I'm not here to hurt your family or take advantage of your grief. I'm here because I've been carrying a promise for 3 years, and I finally understand what it means." Victoria's pulse quickened. "What promise?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in tissue paper. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a silver bracelet, delicate and clearly made for a child. The nameplate read, "Sophia," in flowing script. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her wrist. "My bracelet! Daddy gave it to me for my birthday. I lost it when we went hiking." "You didn't lose it," Marcus said gently. "Your father gave it to me, right before he died." The words hit the room like a physical force. Victoria felt her breath stop, her world tilting on its axis for the third time that day. "That's impossible," she whispered. "David fell alone. The rescue team found his body at the bottom of Canyon Ridge. There were no witnesses, no survivors except Sophia, and she was unconscious when they found her." Marcus met her eyes, his expression grave but steady. "Mrs. Blackwood, I was there." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications too large to process. Sophia moved closer to her mother, but her eyes never left Marcus's face. "I was hiking alone that day," Marcus continued. "Different trail, but it connects to the same ridge system. I heard the rock slide first, then screaming. By the time I reached the area, your husband was—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He was badly injured, but he was conscious. Sophia was about 20 feet away, unconscious but breathing." Victoria's hand shook as she reached for her daughter. "Why didn't you call for help? Why isn't any of this in the police report?" "I did call for help, but cell service was spotty up there, and the rescue team was dealing with another emergency that day. Response time was going to be hours, not minutes." Marcus's voice dropped lower. "Your husband knew he wasn't going to make it, but he was terrified about Sophia being alone when she woke up." Marcus unwrapped the bracelet completely, revealing something else, a small piece of paper, yellowed and carefully folded. "He made me promise to watch over her. Said she had dreams sometimes, bad ones, and that she'd need someone to remind her she wasn't alone in the dark." Marcus held out the paper. "He wrote this for her, asked me to give it to her when she was ready." Victoria's hands trembled as she unfolded the note. David's handwriting, unmistakable even in its shaky urgency. "My little bird, if you're reading this, someone good found you in the dark. Trust him. He promised Daddy he'd never let the shadows win. You are braver than you know, and you are never, ever alone. Love always, Daddy." The room went completely quiet, except for the sound of Victoria's sharp intake of breath. Sophia stared at the note, her small fingers tracing the familiar handwriting. "But the rescue report," Victoria said, struggling to understand. "They said David was found alone, that he'd been dead for hours when they arrived." Marcus nodded slowly. "I stayed with him until the end, about an hour after I found them. But when I heard the helicopters coming, your husband made me promise one more thing. He said Sophia would blame herself if she knew anyone else had been there, that she'd think she should have done something to save us both." Victoria's throat constricted as the pieces began falling into place. "So you left before the rescue team arrived?" "I carried Sophia to a safer spot where they'd find her easily, made sure she was stable, and then I disappeared. Your husband made me swear I'd never tell her what really happened unless she needed to know." Marcus gestured toward the bracelet. He said she'd understand when she was ready. Sophia had been silent through this entire exchange, but now she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "The dreams started after Daddy died." "I know," Marcus said gently, "because they started for me too, the same night." Victoria felt her rational mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "You're saying you've been having the same dreams as my daughter for 3 years?" "Every night," Marcus confirmed. "Sophia running through dark corridors, shadows chasing her, and me trying to reach her but never getting there in time. Always the same sequence, always ending the same way, with me failing to save her." He ran a hand through his graying hair. looking suddenly older and more tired. For 3 years, I've been going crazy trying to understand what they meant. I saw therapists, took medication, tried everything to make them stop, but they kept coming. Every night, the same little girl calling for help, and me unable to reach her. Victoria's mind raced. How did you find us? I didn't find you. You found me. Marcus smiled sadly. 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning windows at the Meridian building downtown. Your office is on the 42nd floor. I saw you through the glass, working at your desk, and something clicked. I'd seen that profile before in newspaper articles about David Blackwood's death. I realized you were his widow. He paused, gathering himself. I started researching. Found out about Sophia's sleep problems through some medical records my friend who works at Children's Hospital mentioned. Privacy laws are strict, but when someone's desperate enough to talk about a case that's stumping everyone, word gets around. A little girl named Sophia Blackwood with night terrors that no one could explain. Victoria felt goosebumps rise along her arms. So you arranged to be here today. I called your cleaning service and volunteered to cover their regular guy's shift. I had to know if it was the same Sophia from my dreams. Marcus looked directly at Sophia. The moment I saw you on those stairs, I knew. You looked exactly like you do in the dreams, except... Except what? Sophia asked quietly. Except you weren't afraid of me. In the dreams, you're always running toward me for help. Today, you were scared, but not of me. You were scared of remembering. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The afternoon stretched on as Marcus shared more details. How he'd left his job as a construction foreman after the dreams started affecting his work. How he'd taken simple jobs that didn't require much concentration, anything to get by while carrying the weight of a promise he couldn't understand. Victoria learned that Marcus had a daughter of his own, Emma, now 15, who lived with his ex-wife in Sacramento. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, not because of infidelity or money, but because Marcus had become a different person after David's death, haunted, obsessed with dreams that made no sense. I lost my family trying to understand why I was dreaming about yours, Marcus said with quiet pain. Emma barely speaks to me anymore. She thinks I chose some fantasy over reality. Victoria felt a sharp pang of empathy. Here was a man who'd sacrificed his own family to honor a promise made to a dying stranger. A man who'd spent 3 years carrying someone else's burden without even understanding why. What changed? Victoria asked. Why did you finally decide to find us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Last week, the dreams changed. For the first time in 3 years, they were different. Instead of Sophia running away from the shadows, she was standing still. And instead of calling for help, she was calling my name. Not help me or save me, just my name, Marcus, over and over. He looked at Sophia, his eyes bright with emotion. That's when I knew. The dreams weren't about me saving you. They were about you finding me. You were never the one who needed rescuing, little bird. I was. Sophia slipped off the sofa and walked over to Marcus. Without hesitation, she reached out and took his scarred left hand in both of hers. The shadows aren't scary anymore, she said simply. They're just dark places where we haven't turned on the lights yet. Victoria watched her daughter, her brave, damaged, beautiful daughter, comfort a grown man who'd been carrying her father's dying wish for 3 years. In that moment, she understood something profound about the nature of promises and protection. David hadn't asked Marcus to save Sophia from her nightmares. He'd asked him to make sure she never had to face the darkness alone. Marcus, Victoria said softly, what do you do for work now? Janitorial services mostly. Some maintenance work, whatever keeps the bills paid. He shrugged, embarrassed. Nothing important. Victoria stood up, her mind already racing with possibilities. As CEO of a tech company, she was used to finding solutions to complex problems. But this wasn't a business challenge. This was about family, about healing, about honoring the love that had brought them together. "I have a proposition," she said carefully. "Our estate manager retired last month. The position involves overseeing property maintenance, coordinating with service providers, managing security systems. It pays well, includes housing in the guest cottage, and would allow flexible hours for someone dealing with unique circumstances." Marcus stared at her. "Mrs. Blackwood, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," Victoria replied firmly. "It's practical. Sophia's nightmares have cost me 3 years of sleep and hundreds of thousands in medical bills. If having you nearby helps her heal, that's worth far more than a salary to me." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Besides, David asked you to watch over her. Hard to do that from across town." Marcus looked down at Sophia, who was still holding his hand. The little girl nodded encouragingly. "The guest cottage has 2 bedrooms," Victoria continued. "Your daughter Emma could visit on weekends, holidays. We have a pool, hiking trails, plenty of space for a teenager to feel welcome." For the first time since entering their lives, Marcus smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered features. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Victoria thought about the board meetings she'd missed today, the merger documents waiting for her signature, the empire that demanded constant attention. 3 years ago, she would have called that life meaningful. Now, watching her daughter connect with the man who'd promised her father to keep her safe, Victoria understood the difference between success and purpose. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. As the sun set over the San Francisco hills, 3 people who'd been carrying the weight of the same tragedy finally began to understand that healing doesn't always come from letting go. Sometimes it comes from holding on to promises, to dreams, and to the people brave enough to honor both. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Sophia Blackwood slept without nightmares. And in the guest cottage where Marcus Sullivan was already moving his few belongings, a man finally stopped running from dreams and started embracing the purpose they'd revealed. The shadows were still there, but now, finally, someone had turned on the lights. 3 months later, the Blackwood estate hummed with a different energy. Sophia's laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for years. Marcus had transformed not just the property, fixing broken fountains, replanting neglected gardens, updating security systems with military precision, but the very atmosphere of the place. Victoria found herself coming home earlier, staying later, actually living in the house instead of just sleeping there between board meetings. She'd watch from her office window as Marcus taught Sophia basic carpentry in his workshop, or help her tend the vegetable garden they'd planted behind the guest cottage. The nightmares had stopped completely. Sophia slept through the night, woke up smiling, and had even convinced Victoria to let her invite classmates over for the first time since David's death. Everything was perfect, which was exactly when Victoria's carefully rebuilt world began to crumble. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September. Victoria was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mrs. Blackwood, there's a Detective Morrison from SFPD on line 2. He says it's urgent." Victoria's blood chilled. She'd learned to fear unexpected calls from authorities. "Mrs. Blackwood," Detective Morrison's voice was professional but grave. "I'm calling about Marcus Sullivan. I understand he's employed on your property." "Yes, is there a problem?" "Ma'am, we've received some disturbing information about Mr. Sullivan's background, information that suggests he may have misrepresented himself to you and your family." Victoria's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of information? We've been contacted by his ex-wife in Sacramento. She's filed a report claiming that Mr. Sullivan has been stalking your family for years. She says he's become obsessed with your daughter, that he's created an elaborate fantasy about some connection to your late husband. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. That's impossible. Marcus was there when my husband died. He has David's note, Sophia's bracelet. Ma'am, Detective Morrison interrupted gently, we've reviewed the original rescue reports from your husband's accident. There's no mention of any other hiker in the area. No evidence anyone else was present at the scene. Victoria's office suddenly felt airless. But the bracelet, the note, could have been taken from your husband's body before rescue workers arrived, or obtained through other means. Mrs. Sullivan claims her ex-husband has been collecting newspaper clippings about your family since the accident. She says his obsession with your daughter destroyed their marriage. Victoria's mind raced. Why would she wait 3 months to come forward? She says she only learned Mr. Sullivan was living on your property last week, when their daughter Emma mentioned it during a phone call. Apparently, the girl has been visiting your estate on weekends. Victoria's throat went dry. Emma had been coming every other weekend, a shy teenager who'd gradually opened up around Sophia and Victoria. The girl clearly adored her father, spoke of him with obvious love and respect. Ma'am, we need to speak with you and your daughter as soon as possible. If Mr. Sullivan has been manipulating your family, especially a vulnerable child. No. The word came out sharper than Victoria intended. Marcus has never done anything inappropriate. He's been nothing but helpful and kind. Mrs. Blackwood, I understand this is difficult to hear, but we have a responsibility to investigate any potential threat to a minor, especially given Mr. Sullivan's history of mental health issues following your husband's death. Victoria's heart hammered. What mental health issues? Severe depression, anxiety, paranoid episodes. According to his ex-wife, he spent 2 years in and out of psychiatric treatment, claiming he was having prophetic dreams about a little girl he needed to save. She has documentation from his doctors. The detective's words blurred together as Victoria's world tilted. Could everything Marcus had told them be an elaborate delusion? Was the man she'd trusted with her daughter's healing actually the architect of an incredibly sophisticated deception? We'll be there in an hour, Detective Morrison said. Please don't alert Mr. Sullivan to our call, for your safety and your daughter's. The line went dead, leaving Victoria alone with doubts that felt like poison spreading through her veins. Victoria found Sophia in the garden with Marcus, both of them covered in soil as they harvested late summer tomatoes. The scene looked so normal, so peaceful, that Victoria almost called Detective Morrison back to cancel everything. Mommy! Sophia ran over, her face bright with joy. Look how many we picked. Marcus says we can make sauce tonight. Victoria forced a smile, her eyes meeting Marcus's over her daughter's head. He was looking at her with the same gentle attention he always showed, nothing in his expression suggesting deception or mental instability. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you go wash up? We might have some visitors soon. Something in Victoria's tone made Marcus straighten. As Sophia skipped toward the house, he approached Victoria with concern written across his weathered features. Everything okay? You look upset. This was the moment to confront him with Detective Morrison's allegations, to demand truth from someone who might have been lying to them for months. But looking into Marcus's eyes that had never shown her anything but honesty, Victoria found herself unable to speak. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Tell me about your ex-wife." Marcus went very still. Linda, what about her? Why did your marriage really end? For a long moment, Marcus didn't answer. He looked out across the garden they'd built together, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Because I couldn't let go," he said quietly. "After David died, after the dream started, I became someone Linda didn't recognize. I spent every penny we had on private investigators trying to track down your family. I neglected Emma, neglected my marriage, neglected everything that mattered because I was obsessed with understanding why a dying stranger's last words had taken over my life." Victoria's heart sank. "Obsessed." "Not with your daughter," Marcus said quickly, seeming to understand her concern. "With the promise I made, with the responsibility I felt. Linda tried to get me help, tried to make me see that I was destroying our family for people I didn't even know. She was right." He turned to face Victoria fully, his expression open and vulnerable. "I lost my wife because I couldn't explain why keeping my word to your husband mattered more than my own family's needs. I lost 2 years of Emma's childhood chasing a promise that seemed impossible to keep. And even now, even having found you both, I'm not sure Linda will ever forgive me." Victoria felt tears threaten. "Marcus, there's something else," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Something I haven't told you, about why I really left the accident scene before the rescue team arrived." Victoria braced herself for another revelation that might shatter everything she'd come to believe. "Your husband didn't just ask me to watch over Sophia," Marcus continued. "In his final moments, he grabbed my hand and said something that's haunted me ever since. He said, 'Promise me you'll find her when she needs you most. Promise me you'll be there when the darkness comes back.'" Marcus met Victoria's eyes, his own bright with emotion. He wasn't just talking about nightmares, Victoria. He was talking about something specific, something he knew was coming. Before Victoria could respond, the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the house. Detective Morrison had arrived. Marcus went rigid, his military training evident in the way he automatically assessed the threat. "Whatever this is," he said quietly, "I want you to know that everything I told you about that day is true. David's note, the bracelet, the promise, all of it, no matter what anyone else claims." Victoria looked at this man who'd become so important to their healing, so crucial to Sophia's happiness, and made a choice that would have terrified her rational mind if she'd given it time to think. "I believe you," she said simply. The doorbell rang, echoing through the estate like a warning bell. As they walked toward the house together, Victoria realized that the real test of their unconventional family wasn't whether Marcus's story was true. It was whether the truth mattered less than the healing he'd brought to their lives. Detective Morrison stood on the front steps with his partner, both wearing expressions of professional concern. Behind them, Victoria saw a woman she didn't recognize, mid-40s, blonde, with the worn face of someone who'd carried too much worry for too long. "Mrs. Blackwood," Detective Morrison said, "thank you for seeing us. This is Detective Chen, and this is Linda Sullivan, Marcus's ex-wife." Linda's eyes found Marcus immediately, her expression a complex mix of anger, pain, and something that might have been relief. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly. "I think it's time we told the truth about what really happened after David Blackwood died." Victoria felt the ground shift beneath her feet for what felt like the 100th time since Marcus had entered their lives. But this time, instead of fear, she felt something else entirely: determination. Whatever truths were about to be revealed, whatever accusations were about to be made, Victoria was done running from complications. Her daughter was happy and healthy for the first time in 3 years. Marcus had become family in ways that transcended employment or even friendship. "Please come in," she said, her voice steady. "But I should warn you, whatever you think you know about Marcus, you're talking about a man who's proven himself to my family through actions, not just words. Linda's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm not here to hurt Marcus. I'm here to protect him, and maybe to finally understand why a promise to a stranger mattered more to him than the family he already had. As they gathered in the living room, Victoria and Sophia on one side, Marcus standing alone in the middle, Detective Morrison and his partner flanking Linda Sullivan, Victoria realized they'd reached the moment that would define everything that came after, the moment when love would prove stronger than fear, or fear would win and tear apart everything they'd built. Sophia moved to Marcus's side and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his scarred ones. Marcus keeps his promises, she said simply, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of a child who'd never been disappointed. That's what good people do. And in that moment, Victoria knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The truth, when it finally emerged, would prove more complex and beautiful than anyone in that room could have imagined. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.